Tonight, what I wanted to do is go weeks 7 through 10 in college football and give you the circle games. Keep in mind, this is not a comprehensive list. There are some very big games that won't be on this list. This is just a sample size of what to look forward to in sort of that second, third portion of the season. Let's start with Florida at LSU. You remember this last year. You remember the shoe. I didn't even think of it until the very end of formatting this segment, so I just wrote asterisk, shoe, remember to say. So there's the shoe. More important matters at hand, though. The Florida Gators are going to play Alabama early in the year. They will not be favored to win that game. If I had to pick the game today, I wouldn't pick Florida to win it. Crazier things have happened, I know. But LSU is going to be favored to be 6-0 in this game. And so I really wonder where the teams will be. You could say that about every game by the time we get to week 7 and later, like what are the records going to be? But also, there's a wide range of scenarios here. This is a big game in and of itself. It does not need storyline help, but it has it this year anyway. This is one of the great environments in SEC football and, for that matter, college football. You've got the entire backdrop of what happened last year and how inexplicable that result seemed. That was also the game that sparked a lot of confidence and belief in Max Johnson, who may very well go on to win the LSU quarterback job this year and may be the guy that's responsible for them being 6-0 when they roll into this game, and they'll be favored in this one too. This is when you start to really find out whether LSU has that playoff potential, whether it's going to be a year that's truly special and all the internal dynamics are fixed and that talent's living up to its capability. That's on the LSU side. But on the Florida side, if they've already got a conference loss under their belt, this could very well be do or die for their SEC Eastern Division hopes, because if they can win this one and they have no more than one loss on the resume, well, that Georgia game in Jacksonville could still decide the East. But if they've already got a loss and they lose this one, Georgia could have a game and a half cushion for all intents and purposes when they go into Jacksonville. So this one's really big. How about Miami at North Carolina? Same exact day. This, I think, is my favorite game in the ACC this year. Miami at North Carolina. This will be Miami's season. On this Saturday, it's week 7, but I feel the exact same for North Carolina. Remember the whole schedule dynamic thing here, because it's pretty heavily tilted in Miami's favor. North Carolina will be playing their 7th game in 7 weeks. Not only will Miami be coming off a bye, but the previous game they play is on a Thursday. So they're coming into this thing on 9 days rest. Manny Diaz could not have drawn the conference schedule up better for himself if they gave him the schedule to do it himself. I remember this time last year, we were sort of going up and down Miami's schedule, and you said, what's the game they need in order to prove they're back? Because that's a question every year from Miami. And people started, once they started 3-0, they started looking at that Clemson game, and they weren't close. They got physically manhandled by Clemson. I will never forget, Miami's receivers couldn't get off the line of scrimmage against Clemson, and that wasn't a particularly historic defense for Brent Venables last year. Well, they don't have Clemson in the regular season this year. This is that game, though. This is their chance to go on the road and have one circled and tee it up and put forth their best effort. And if they win this game, Miami's in the driver's seat for that division. Miami is all of a sudden in the driver's seat to potentially go play for a conference title at the end of the year. Week 8, the very next week, let's take it up to the Big Ten. Ohio State is at Indiana in Week 8. Now, you think about this game, and you think Ohio State decided favorite. There's no way I'm picking Indiana to win that game. It would take, a +3 or +4 turnover kind of afternoon. Well, Indiana's been prone to do it before, first off. But secondly, the biggest question or questions with Ohio State, clearly defensively this year, are going to be on the back end. And that doesn't mean that they can't get emphatically answered, but that's where the questions will be, and anybody who watched Ohio State football last year understands why. Well, I say that because if you look at the Buckeyes' schedule, which you're seeing if you're watching on YouTube, it could get tested in Week 1 against Minnesota. Sure, Anthony Brown and Oregon's receivers, that looks to be the best stable of receiving talent that Mario Cristobal's had at Oregon, or that Oregon's had, period, in several years. But then you start to look down that schedule. Tulsa, Akron, at Rutgers, Maryland. It could be that this game at Indiana is the stiffest regular season test that the back end of the Ohio State defense faces. Now, they got a bye week before they play it, but two things could happen here. You could either just have Indiana pull the outright upset. Now, that's a huge story on its own merit. But even if Ohio State goes in to win this game, the style in which they win it and the style in which their defense plays, this is the kind of game that you pull out again when they're headed to the playoffs a month and a half later, and you say, they're facing fill in the blank, good passing attack. Let's go check out how they did. Who exposed some potential red flags with Ohio State this year? How about that Indiana game? Penix was back. They had all their receivers back. Let's see how they did. So Ohio State 49-14 give me a ton of confidence about their chances in the playoff against anyone. Ohio State 49-37 may tell a little bit different story. Let's move on. Georgia versus Florida. This is the next week. This is week 9. This is obviously, as it is every year, in Jacksonville. Here's what is beautiful about sports in general, but here's what's especially beautiful about this rivalry. There is immense trash talk every year, but it eventually gets put to the test because they're eventually going to play. And so you got a lot of things being said about Georgia and Florida. Happens every year, but right now you got Georgia folks firmly convinced. Last year was a blip on the radar screen. It was Florida peaking as Georgia dipped a little bit. That will not replicate itself this year. Certainly when you're set at quarterback in JT Daniels, and likewise they've lost Kyle Trask, and they're going to trot Emory Jones out against us, and we don't believe he's capable of beating us. Why? Because we're Georgia. Meanwhile, in the Gator side of things, you're thinking if we can even be comparable talent-wise, we know Dan will outcoach Kirby on Saturday. All of these things are very heartfelt, but it's got to be put to the test. I don't care about talking. I love talking as long as the game's going to happen. The talking I don't like is what would happen if so-and-so played so-and-so. Well, if I don't get to see it, it's a moot point or a mute point. But this game's going to happen. I don't even have the date. I know it's week 9, and that I very much look forward to. Look at Florida's schedule. We just touched on this, but talk about it one more time. They got Bama in week 3. They will be favored in every other game until they go to LSU, and that LSU game I think will have a ton of kind of pre-Georgia hype around it because that game could very well determine what this one means, not to the fan bases, not for the rivalry, but within the context of the SEC Eastern Division race. Then over in the SEC West, 1 week later, in Week 10, we've got LSU at Alabama. Been my favorite game in college football for over a decade now. It's a pretty unique game. I think it lost a little of its luster for a second, and then it came back emphatically in 2019. And then last year it was biblical last year. But you're supposed to forget about last year. This LSU team this year is supposed to have the juice to make me forget about last year. They could very well roll into this game undefeated. LSU will be favored to roll into this game undefeated. Having said that, think about what could be in the balance here. And think about how it could go differently than maybe the preview magazine culture would lead you to believe. Because it is a widely held notion out there that by the time LSU plays Bama in Week 10, that their backs are against the wall. They've got one or multiple losses. They're in wounded animal mode, and Bama's just cruising along undefeated. Might I remind you that Alabama's got to break in about 100 new pieces offensively too, and they will have already gone to Florida and to Texas A&M in very losable games before this point. What if Alabama's lost a game? Like, it's not totally out of the realm of possibility, guys. It has happened before. And what if LSU's the one that comes in there, and it's like 2019 all over again? Now, this is a stretch. This is a stretch. But you got to follow me, because if we've learned anything over the past month, it's don't laugh at any prediction in college football. The crazier it is, possible, the more likely it becomes. So LSU, let's revisit this. It's not like I would odds-on favor this scenario, but it could be that LSU has got a little more shine on them at that point. In Alabama, maybe you got a little doubt about them. This is a team that lost back-to-back years to Ole Miss in 2015 and 2016 and ended up paying for a title in both years. My point is, crazier things have happened before. And then last, in Week 10, same week, out on the West Coast, it's such an important game for the Pac-12. Oregon at Washington. This stretch, starting in Week 6 and then on through Week 10, is very big for this conference. Week 6 is where Utah goes to USC. Now, that could very well decide the Pac-12 South. And then this one in Week 10 could decide the Pac-12 North. And the funny thing is, no one is circling this game. On the West Coast they are, but nationally not many people are circling this game. But this is such an important game for both teams now. For Jimmy Lake in Washington, this is a chance for validation on the national stage. Because to be honest with you, I don't know that a win at Michigan in Week 2 would accomplish that nearly as much as this win would. And secondly, for Oregon, it's a chance. If you're undefeated at this point, that means you've beaten Ohio State, so you already got your validation. But if you've lost to Ohio State, That's not a conference game. This is your chance to reestablish yourself on the national scene. You've gotten your feet under you after an early season loss, which no one frowns at. It's at the shoe. It's against Ohio State. And maybe you emphatically win this game. Either way, very important for these two games to carry a lot of national significance for the Pac-12. So those are some circle games week 7 through 10.